Well, a South Jersey elementary school teacher accused of having a child with a student faced a judge today. 34-year-old Laura Caron of Cape May Courthouse was arrested yesterday on charges of aggravated sexual.
A New Jersey family thought they were gaining a trusted friend, a mentor for their children. Instead, they welcomed a predator into their home. Laura Caron was a 26-year-old teacher, respected in her community, known for her kindness and dedication. But behind the scenes, she wasn't just a teacher. She was a master manipulator. A woman who turned trust into a weapon. Before we go into this story, kindly subscribe to this channel to support us, and then we can bring you more chilling stories like this. Thank you. Now let's go on. This isn't just a story about a crime. It's a story about betrayal, grooming, and the devastating impact of abuse. And it all unraveled when a father looked at a child and saw his own reflection staring back at him. But to truly understand this case, we have to go back to where it all began. It started with a glance. A moment so small, so ordinary, that it should have passed without a second thought. One night in December 2023, a New Jersey father sat at the kitchen table, watching his kids argue over the last slice of pizza. The house was loud, full of the usual chaos. Someone's phone was buzzing, the TV was on low, the dog scratched at the back door. But in the middle of all that noise, his eyes landed on his son. And something felt off. At first he couldn't put his finger on it. It was just a feeling, an itch in the back of his mind. But then the boy laughed, tilting his head in a way that was eerily familiar. And that's when it hit him. His son looked too much like him. Not in the way that families naturally resemble each other. This was different. It was the same jawline, the same deep-set eyes, the same way his left eyebrow lifted just slightly higher than the right when he smiled. His stomach twisted. Why hadn't he noticed this before? Maybe he was overthinking. Maybe he was tired. But once the thought was there, it wouldn't leave him alone. Over the next few days, it became an obsession. He found himself studying his son's face, comparing old photos, searching for something, anything that could explain why this sudden resemblance felt so unsettling. And then a memory surfaced. Laura Caron, the fifth-grade teacher who had become a family friend. The woman who had been there for years at birthday parties, on vacations. The person they'd trusted enough to let their children sleep over at her house, even stay there for long stretches of time. And then, another memory. His son, 11 years old, staying at Laura's house more and more. His son always close to her. His son, sleeping in her bed. A sickening realization began to settle in. Could it be possible? Had this woman, this teacher, been more than just a friend? The thought was unbearable. But once he saw it, he couldn't unsee it. His child might not just be his child. And with that single realization, the world he thought he knew started to unravel. Because Laura Caron had been hiding something. And the truth was far worse than he could have ever imagined. But to understand what really happened, we need to go back. Back to the beginning. Back to 2015. Before the betrayal. Before the secrets. There was just trust. In 2015, the Caron family's life was like any other. Busy, a little messy, but filled with love. 2 parents, 3 kids, routines built around school schedules, soccer practices, and Friday night takeout. And then one day Laura Caron entered the picture. She was 26 years old, a teacher at their children's elementary school in New Jersey. She taught 5th grade, and 2 of the Caron children, the victim and his older brother, ended up in her class. By all accounts, she was the kind of teacher parents loved. Dedicated, warm, the type who stayed late to tutor struggling students and sent encouraging notes home. So when she took a special interest in their boys, no one thought twice. It started small. She'd offer extra help after school. She'd chat with their parents at pickup, tell them how bright and well-mannered their sons were. Then came the small favors, driving them home on rainy days, bringing them little gifts. She was thoughtful, generous, safe. And when the school year ended, the relationship didn't. She'd text the boys' mother just to check in. She'd show up at their games, cheering from the sidelines. And eventually, she wasn't just their former teacher. She was a family friend. By 2016, Laura wasn't just dropping by. She was spending holidays with them. She was coming over for dinners. She was someone they trusted completely. So when she offered to have the kids sleep over at her house, it seemed harmless. Of course, at first, it was just for fun. A movie night. A weekend stay when the parents had work. But then those weekends turned into something else. The children, the victim, his brother, and their younger sister, started staying longer. And soon it wasn't just occasional. Laura Caron had become a second home. By 2017, the boys were spending weeks at a time with her. By 2018 they were staying permanently. And no one questioned it. Laura was helping out. She was like an aunt. She was family. But behind closed doors something else was happening. The victim's sister, just a child herself, started to notice things. Her brother, just 11 years old, wasn't just sleeping at Laura's house. He was sleeping in her bed. This is how grooming works. It's never obvious at first. It's not a stranger lurking in the shadows. It's someone who seems kind, who seems safe. It's small steps, so small that no one realizes what's happening until it's too late. Laura isolated the victim. She made him feel special. The favorite. The one she cared for the most. She blurred the lines between teacher and friend, between friend and family, between family and something else entirely. She created emotional dependency. By the time the abuse began, it wasn't just physical. It was psychological. He didn't just trust her. He needed her. And that's exactly what she wanted. Because from that moment on, Laura Caron wasn't just a trusted teacher. She was his entire world. And the abuse was just beginning. It started in the bathroom. The first time. The night was quiet. His siblings were asleep. The house was dark except for the glow beneath the bathroom door. He was in the shower, steam rising around him, water hitting the tiles. He was 11 years old. A child who still left his sneakers untied, who still laughed at cartoons, who had never known real fear. Then he heard it. And then the click of the lock. Laura Caron stepped inside. He froze. His heart pounded. What was she doing? This wasn't normal. She wasn't supposed to be there. But before he could react, before he could even process the wrongness of it all, she spoke. Her voice was soft, soothing. Shh. It's okay. She sat on the edge of the tub, watching him through the curtain. You trust me, don't you? He did. You know I care about you, right? He did. This is just our secret. And then she pulled the curtain back. The first time, he didn't understand. He didn't fight. He didn't scream. He didn't even know what to feel, only that something deep inside of him felt wrong. But she was gentle. She didn't act like it was bad. She didn't act like she was hurting him. When it was over, she smiled. See? That wasn't so bad. I love you. You love me too, don't you? And that's where it started. Not just the abuse. Not just the trauma. But the manipulation. Because it wasn't fear she used to control him. It was love. This is how predators work. This is how predators work. Not with force. Not with violence. But with power. Laura Caron didn't just take his body. She took his mind. She turned his confusion into guilt. If this was wrong, why did you let me? You came to me, remember? You love me, don't you? She made him believe that it wasn't her doing something to him. It was them. Together. She turned the fear into something else. Something even more dangerous. Dependency. By the time he turned 12, it was routine. She'd find excuses to be alone with him. She'd lock the bathroom door. She'd wait until his siblings were asleep. She made sure no one would ever suspect a thing. And she kept him close. She bought him gifts. She whispered to him at night, telling him she'd always protect him. She made sure he never thought of himself as a victim. This is special. No one would understand. They'd try to take you away from me. And that was the biggest manipulation of all. She made him believe that this was love. As he got older, the abuse escalated. By 13, it wasn't just behind locked doors. It was anywhere they could be alone. By 14, she convinced him that they were in an actual relationship. By 15, he wasn't just keeping her secret, he was defending her. And through it all, she convinced him that he was the one in control. You wanted this first? You're not a kid anymore. You make me happy. Don't you want to keep making me happy? She made sure that by the time he was old enough to understand what had been done to him, he wouldn't want to see it. Because when the truth finally came out, when the world found out what she had done, he was the one standing in front of cameras defending her. I wasn't groomed. I wasn't manipulated. She's the only one who ever really loved me. And that was the biggest tragedy of all. Because the moment he believed that, Laura Caron won. It happened in December 2023. The moment that changed everything. The Caron family was gathered in their living room, just like any other night. The father, let's call him Michael, sat back watching his son. And then something hit him. A feeling. A thought he couldn't shake. He looked at his son, now 15 years old, and felt a chill crawl up his spine. Because the boy looked like him. Not just in the way that all kids resemble their parents. No, it was something stronger. The same nose. The same jawline. The same little details that shouldn't have been there. And suddenly his mind started racing. Because if the boy looked like him, then that meant It wasn't possible. It shouldn't have been possible. But deep down he knew. Something was wrong. At first it was just a suspicion. But the more Michael thought about it, the more it gnawed at him. Why did his son look so much like him? He started going back in his mind, piecing together the timeline. And that's when he saw it. 2015. His son was in 5th grade. The same year Laura Caron became a family friend. 2016, she was spending more and more time with them. 2017. The kid started staying over at her house. By 2018 his son, just 11 years old, was living with her. The memories flooded back, things he had overlooked, things he hadn't questioned at the time. The way Caron always had her son by her side. The way she hugged him too long. The way she always said, "We have such a special bond." And then the DNA test. A quiet moment in the bathroom, swabbing his son's cheek, sending it off. And when the results came back, his stomach dropped. The boy wasn't his biological son. He wasn't Caron's adopted child. He was her victim. And just like that, the world tilted. Everything they thought they knew about Laura Caron was a lie. When Michael confronted his son, expecting anger, expecting tears, expecting rage, instead he got something else. Denial. "This is stupid. She didn't do anything to me. You don't understand. She loves me." He defended her. Fiercely. He refused to believe that what happened was wrong. Because in his mind it wasn't abuse. It was a relationship. A love story. Caron had spent years rewriting reality for him, teaching him that he was special, that they were meant to be together. And now, when the truth was staring him in the face, he couldn't see it. Or worse, he didn't want to. Michael had no choice. He confronted Laura Caron. And how did she react? Did she break down? Did she apologize? Did she show an ounce of guilt? No. She smiled. Like she had already won. "He loves me. You can't change that. He's going to defend me. Watch." And the worst part? She was right. Because when the police finally got involved, when she was arrested and charged, the victim defended her in front of the entire world. "They need to drop all charges. I wasn't groomed. She saved my family. I love her." And that was the final proof of just how deep her control went. Because even behind bars, even facing trial, even with the whole world knowing what she did, Laura Caron still had him in her grasp. But law enforcement wasn't about to let her walk free. They went back. They dug through years of messages, emails, and texts. They found records of hotel stays, surveillance footage of them together, alone late at night, journal entries where she wrote about their love, and most damning of all, testimony from the victim's own sister. She had seen the way Laura looked at him. She had heard the bathroom door lock at night. She had always known something wasn't right. And finally, after years of silence, someone listened. Laura Caron was arrested. She was charged with multiple counts of sexual assault. She now faces up to 10 years in prison. But even as she sits in a jail cell, even as her trial approaches, there's one question that lingers. Will her victim ever truly escape her influence? Or will he spend the rest of his life defending the woman who stole his childhood? Because sometimes, the scars you can't see are the ones that never heal. When the verdict came down, the courtroom was silent. Laura Caron, guilty. Her sentence? 10 years in prison. 10 years. A decade behind bars for stealing a child's innocence, for manipulating him into believing it was love, for embedding herself into his family and taking everything. And for many that sentence felt too light. Because when you spend years grooming a child, taking away their sense of self, their ability to recognize right from wrong, how do you put a number on that? And yet, for the victim, this wasn't justice. Because in his mind, she had done nothing wrong. The Caron family was shattered. A father, who blamed himself. "I should have seen it. I let this happen under my own roof." A mother, who felt powerless watching her son slip away into a reality she couldn't pull him from. And a sister, who had known something was wrong but didn't have the words, the courage, the proof, the guilt, the anger, the what if. Because the hardest part? Even with Caron behind bars, the damage was already done. While the world saw him as a victim, he saw himself as something else. A partner. A willing participant. Someone who had chosen this. Because that's how grooming works. By the time the abuse starts, it doesn't feel like abuse. Feels like love. Feels like safety. Feels normal. And for years Laura Caron rewrote his reality. She convinced him that their relationship was special. That no one else could understand. That he needed to protect her, not himself. And now, even with her in jail, he still believes it. When cases like these come up, When a female teacher is caught with a male student, society reacts differently. There are jokes. Where was this teacher when I was in school? He's lucky. She's too pretty to be a predator. And that's the problem. Because when the roles are reversed, when a male teacher preys on a young girl, there's no debate. We see it for what it is. But when the abuser is a woman, suddenly the victim isn't really a victim. And that's why so many young boys never come forward. Because they know no one will believe them. Or worse, they'll be told to feel grateful. But there is nothing lucky about being manipulated, controlled, and robbed of your childhood. There is nothing special about an adult exploiting a child who doesn't yet understand what's being taken from them. And until society is ready to accept that, cases like Laura Caron's will keep happening. Because predators don't just exist in one form. And the scars they leave behind don't disappear just because the world refuses to see them. Predators don't always lurk in the shadows. Sometimes, they sit at the family dinner table. They laugh with you. They earn your trust. They become part of your world so deeply, so seamlessly, that by the time you realize what they are, it's too late. And that's the real horror of this story. Laura Caron wasn't some masked stranger in a dark alley. She wasn't a monster under the bed. She was a teacher, a mentor, a trusted friend. A woman who smiled at parents while stealing their son's innocence behind closed doors. And the worst part? She made him believe it was love. This case isn't just about one teacher. It's about power. It's about grooming. It's about the way manipulation doesn't feel like manipulation when it's happening to you. Because here's what we need to understand. Abuse isn't always violent. It doesn't always leave bruises. Sometimes it's a slow, careful process. A touch on the shoulder that lingers a little too long. A text message that feels inappropriate but harmless. A friendship that shouldn't exist but somehow does. And by the time you realize it's abuse, you're already trapped. That's how power works. That's how predators win. And that's why so many victims never speak up. Because what do you do when your own mind tells you it wasn't abuse? When society tells you to feel lucky instead of violated? When the person who hurt you is someone you still care about? So what do? How do we break this cycle? First, believe victims. No matter their gender. No matter how unbelievable their story sounds. Second, educate. Teach kids about boundaries, power imbalances, and the way grooming works so they can recognize it before it's too late. Third, hold predators accountable. No double standards. No, but she's a woman. Abuse is abuse. Period. And finally, speak up. Something feels wrong, trust your instincts. If a child starts acting differently, ask questions. If you see red flags, don't ignore them. Because silence only protects predators. And predators? They count on you saying nothing. Laura Caron may be behind bars. But this story? It's not over. Because there are more victims out there, kids who don't even realize they're victims yet. There are more predators, sitting at family dinners, gaining trust, waiting for the right moment. And until we start recognizing them for what they are, this will keep happening. Now that you've heard the full story, I want to know, what do you think? Do you think Laura Caron's 10-year sentence was enough? Do you think society treats cases like this differently because the predator was a woman? And most importantly, how do we stop this from happening again? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read them all. Let's have this conversation. Let's bring awareness. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Silent Weekend Crimes so you don't miss more stories like this. Because some crimes, they happen in silence. And we're here to bring them to light. If this story moved you, if you believe these conversations need to be had, then let's keep them going. Subscribe to our channel now for more. Because these stories, they don't just deserve to be told. They need to be heard. See you next time.